Imagine waking up every morning feeling like you're being watched. Not by cameras, not by people, but by an invisible judge living inside your head. Every move you make, every word you speak, every small mistake, it whispers, "Not good enough." That voice doesn't scream. It doesn't threaten. It just quietly shapes your life until you can't tell the difference between living and performing. We call it perfection, but perfection isn't peace. It's pressure dressed as purpose. From the outside, it looks admirable. Perfectionists are seen as hardworking, disciplined, driven. They make lists, chase goals, stay up late trying to get every detail right. But underneath all that control, there's a quiet exhaustion, a fear that if they ever stop trying, the world will see who they really are. Because perfectionism isn't about doing your best. It's about never feeling enough, no matter how much you do. Think about it. How many times have you redone something that was already fine? How often do you downplay your own success? Or feel guilty when you rest, as if you haven't earned the right to breathe? That's not ambition. That's self-doubt wearing a mask. Perfectionism tricks you into believing that once you become flawless, you'll finally feel peace. But peace never comes. Because perfection isn't a finish line, it's a moving target. And no matter how close you get, it always shifts just out of reach. Maybe it started small, a parent's praise when you did something perfectly, a teacher's approval, a moment where you realized that being the best got you love. So you kept chasing that feeling. Until one day, the chase became your identity. But here's the truth. The pursuit of perfection doesn't create peace. It creates distance. Distance between who you are and who you pretend to be. Between the self that's real and the self you show to the world. You begin to live like a performer in your own life. Every smile rehearsed, every word filtered, every action calculated to meet invisible expectations. And slowly, without realizing it, you disappear. Because when you spend your life trying to be perfect, you stop being human. No one is born afraid of being imperfect. As children, we draw outside the lines, spill juice on the floor, laugh too loudly, and make mistakes without shame. But somewhere along the way, that freedom fades. It begins quietly, with words that seem harmless at first. Be careful. Do better. You can do more than that. And before we know it, those words stop being lessons. They become laws. You start learning that love, praise, and acceptance are things you earn, not things you deserve. Maybe it came from a parent who only smiled when you succeeded. Maybe it came from teachers who valued grades more than growth. Or maybe it came from the world itself, a world that rewards performance more than authenticity. Each small moment adds up. A missed mark, a disappointed look, a silent comparison, and slowly, a seed takes root in your mind. The belief that to be loved, you must be perfect. At first, it drives you to achieve. You want to make everyone proud. You want to prove your worth. But with every achievement comes the fear of losing it. You start asking yourself, what if I fail next time? What if I'm not as good tomorrow? That's how perfectionism grows. Not from ambition, but from fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of disapproval. Fear that being yourself just isn't enough. As children, we learn through reflection. We see ourselves through the eyes of others. When those eyes show disappointment or withdrawal, it teaches us something dangerous. If I'm not perfect, I'm not safe. So we adapt. We become careful. We hide the messy parts of ourselves, the tears, the anger, the confusion. We start to polish everything. Our work, our words, our emotions, until they shine just enough to be accepted. And little by little, we build a false version of ourselves. One that looks flawless on the outside, but trembles on the inside, terrified of being seen. You see, perfectionism isn't about being strong. It's about being scared. It's a survival strategy disguised as discipline. We cling to it because it once protected us. It helped us navigate rejection. It gave us a sense of control in a world that often felt unpredictable. But what once kept us safe now keeps us stuck. Because every time we chase perfection, we reinforce the belief that our real self isn't worthy. And that belief, that quiet lie, becomes the foundation of who we are. At some point, the fear of not being enough turns into performance. You start to wear a mask, one carefully crafted from confidence, achievement, and control. It looks perfect on the outside, but on the inside, it's heavy. You smile when you're tired. You say, "I'm fine," when you're breaking. You stay composed even when everything inside you is falling apart. The world sees your success, your strength, your discipline. They call you dependable. They call you focused. But they don't see the quiet panic underneath, the fear of being exposed as less than what you appear to be. That's the cruel part about perfectionism. It teaches you to act, not to feel. You start to measure your worth by how well you can hide your flaws. And after years of hiding, you forget what it feels like to be real. You become a master of appearances. You control your tone, your expressions, your body language. You rehearse every move so you never slip. And when people say, "You always have it together," you smile because that's exactly what they're supposed to think. But deep down, you wish someone could see through the mask. Because the truth is, the mask isn't freedom. It's a prison made of other people's expectations. You can't cry because strong people don't cry. You can't rest because productive people don't stop. You can't make mistakes because perfect people don't fail. You start living for the image, not the experience. Every achievement becomes another layer of armor. And the heavier the armor gets, the more distant you feel from yourself. You begin to confuse the mask for your identity. You forget that the person underneath, the one who feels, who fears, who sometimes breaks, is the real you. And that real you is starving for air. The danger of perfectionism isn't just burnout or exhaustion. It's that it makes you believe your mask is your worth. That if you ever take it off, no one will stay. That if you ever stop performing, you'll disappear. But here's the truth. The people who truly love you don't love your perfection. They love your presence. They love your laughter, your honesty, your rawness, the parts that make you human. You just forgot how to show them. The mask once kept you safe, but now it keeps you unseen. And until you take it off, you'll never know how it feels to be fully accepted, not for how well you perform, but for who you really are. Behind every perfectionist's calm smile is fear, not the loud kind that makes you run, but the quiet kind that lives in your chest. The fear of being seen for who you really are. It whispers in every decision. It shapes every word. It hides behind every forced smile that says, "I'm okay." You might not notice it at first, because fear doesn't always feel like fear. Sometimes it feels like responsibility, like pressure, like the need to hold everything together. But underneath all of that is the same question echoing in the back of your mind. What if I'm not enough? That's the core of perfectionism. It's not about doing things perfectly. It's about protecting yourself from rejection. You fear being judged. You fear being misunderstood. You fear letting someone down. So, you try to control everything, your image, your work, your emotions, as if perfection could guarantee safety. But fear has a way of growing quietly. The more you try to silence it, the louder it becomes. You double-check every detail, not because you love precision, but because you dread being wrong. You replay conversations in your head, not because you care too much, but because you can't stand the thought of being misunderstood. You plan, you prepare, you overthink. Because deep down, you believe mistakes make you unworthy. But here's the truth. Fear doesn't disappear through control. It disappears through acceptance. Every time you hide behind the smile, you tell your brain that fear is right, that showing your true self really is dangerous. And so the cycle continues. Perfectionism gives you the illusion of safety, but in reality, it builds a wall between you and the world. You don't let people in, because if they get too close, they might see the cracks. And that thought terrifies you more than loneliness ever could, because loneliness feels painful, but vulnerability feels like death. Yet what if being seen, truly seen, was never the threat you imagined? What if the parts of you you've been hiding are the ones people would love the most? The truth is, fear doesn't vanish by pretending it isn't there. It fades when you face it, when you look it in the eye and say, "I'm still worthy, even when I'm not perfect." Because perfectionism isn't bravery. It's fear disguised as effort. And the moment you stop trying to outrun your fear, you begin to heal from it. We live in a world that rewards appearance over authenticity, where effort matters less than image, where success isn't measured by peace of mind, but by how perfect it looks from the outside. Perfectionism used to be personal. Now it's public. Once, you only had to meet the expectations of those around you, your family, your teachers, your friends. But today, you face the silent judgment of millions. Every time you post, every time you scroll, you're entering a global stage. And whether you realize it or not, you start performing. You post a photo not because it's real, but because it's good enough for others to approve. You share your achievements, but you hide your doubts, your mistakes, your struggles. Because in the digital world, everything is filtered, even our emotions. Social media was supposed to connect us. Instead, it became a mirror that reflects who we think we should be. Every like feels like validation. Every comment feels like proof of worth. But what happens when the likes stop? When the algorithm changes? When the applause fades? You start to wonder if you matter without it. If you still exist when no one's watching. The truth is, perfectionism thrives in comparison. And social media is built on comparison. We see everyone else's highlights. Their perfect bodies, their flawless lives, their constant success. And without realizing it, we start measuring our worth against an illusion. It's a trap, a carefully designed cycle of insecurity and validation. The more we compare, the worse we feel. The worse we feel, the more we perform. And the more we perform, the further we drift from our true selves. Even offline, the pressure continues. Schools reward perfect grades, not curiosity. Workplaces praise productivity, not peace. And society idolizes those who look like they have it all together. So, we hide behind the image of perfection because we fear being left behind in a world that moves too fast. But here's the irony. While everyone is pretending to be perfect, everyone is silently suffering. The pressure you feel, the exhaustion, the quiet doubt that whispers you'll never measure up, everyone else feels it too. But no one says it out loud. Because vulnerability doesn't get likes. Perfection does. And so, we keep feeding the cycle. A world where we pretend to be flawless while breaking silently behind our screens. But there's something the world forgets. Perfection might attract attention, but truth builds connection. And what people crave most isn't your image, it's your honesty. Perfectionism doesn't just shape your habits. It rewires your mind. Your brain begins to live in survival mode, constantly scanning for mistakes, imagining worst-case scenarios, and replaying moments that didn't go exactly right. It feels like control, but it's not control. It's fear disguised as focus. Every decision becomes a battle. Every task, a test. And even when things go well, your brain doesn't rest. It searches for what could have been better, what you should have said, what you could have fixed. It's a cycle of endless correction, a mental loop that never stops spinning. You might think this is discipline, but discipline ends when the task is done. Perfectionism doesn't. It follows you everywhere. In your work, your relationships, your thoughts, and even your sleep. It tells you, you can relax once everything is perfect, but perfection never comes. So, you never rest. Over time, your brain becomes addicted to tension. Stress starts to feel normal. Peace starts to feel uncomfortable. And silence feels like failure. You overthink every choice. You replay every conversation. You worry that people are disappointed in you, even when they're not. Your mind becomes a cage made of what ifs. What if I fail? What if they notice my flaws? What if I lose what I've built? And each what if steals a piece of your peace. Psychologists call it cognitive distortion, the tendency to see the world through fear. Every mistake looks like disaster. Every imperfection feels like rejection. And every delay feels like proof that you're not enough. But your brain isn't broken. It's just been trained to survive, not to live. When you grew up believing love was conditional, your mind learned to stay alert, to fix everything before it broke, to meet every expectation before it disappointed. And while that made you adaptable, it also made you anxious. Because the brain can't tell the difference between a real threat and a perceived one. It reacts the same way, flooding you with stress hormones, raising your heart rate, tightening your chest. That's why perfectionists often feel restless, even when nothing's wrong. Their minds have been taught that calm is dangerous, because calm means you're not trying hard enough. But here's what no one tells you. Your brain can be retrained. The same mind that built your prison can also build your peace. It starts with awareness, noticing when you're spiraling, pausing before you overthink, choosing grace instead of judgment. You can teach your brain that imperfection isn't danger, it's life. Because the goal isn't to silence the noise. It's to change the tune. At first, perfectionism feels like strength. You're admired for your discipline, praised for your work ethic, respected for always having things together. But slowly, quietly, the cracks begin to show. You start waking up tired, even after sleeping. You start feeling guilty for resting. You start losing joy in the things you once loved. Because everything has turned into a performance. The more you try to keep up, the more you begin to fall apart. You tell yourself to push harder, That exhaustion means you're almost there. But in truth, you're burning out. And burnout doesn't happen suddenly. It builds, one small compromise at a time. One ignored emotion. One suppressed need. One, I'm fine too many. Until one day, you're not fine. You find yourself crying without knowing why. You forget simple things. You start avoiding people, projects, responsibilities. Not because you're lazy, but because you're empty. That's the breaking point. The moment when your body and mind stop cooperating. When your system finally says, I can't do this anymore. It's not weakness. It's a survival response. Because perfectionism doesn't just exhaust your energy. It drains your identity. You've spent so long trying to be everything for everyone. You've forgotten who you are when you're not performing. And the scariest part? When the mask starts slipping, you don't even know who's underneath. That's when some people spiral into isolation, depression, or numbness. They stop caring. They stop feeling. Because caring too much has already broken them. But sometimes, that breakdown isn't the end. It's the beginning. Because when everything falls apart, you're forced to face the truth that the person you've been pretending to be was never sustainable. The breakdown becomes a form of clarity. You begin to see that peace isn't found in control. It's found in surrender. You realize that saying no doesn't make you selfish. That asking for help doesn't make you weak. That slowing down doesn't mean you're falling behind. The breaking point is painful, yes, but it's also sacred, because it's the first moment. You stop running from yourself. And in that stillness, after the storm of striving and exhaustion, you finally hear the quiet voice inside you say, you were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be real. Healing doesn't begin the moment you stop breaking. It begins the moment you decide to stop pretending. There's no single day where you suddenly heal. No moment when the weight vanishes or the voices of self-doubt go silent forever. Healing is quieter than that. Slower, gentler. It starts with honesty, with finally admitting to yourself, I'm not okay. And for the first time, you don't say it with shame. You say it with relief. Because pretending to be strong was what kept you stuck. So, you begin to let go of unrealistic standards, of impossible expectations, of the belief that you must earn love by being perfect. You start learning the art of enough. You begin to accept that rest is not laziness, that mistakes are not failures, and that slowing down is not falling behind. It's strange at first, because you've spent your whole life running. But slowly, your body starts to remember what peace feels like. You start saying no without guilt. You start asking for help without apology. You start spending time alone not to escape, but to reconnect. You begin to see that boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're doors to protect your peace. Healing also means forgiving yourself. For all the times you pushed too hard. For all the times you let fear make your choices. For all the times you believed your worth depended on what you could do. It means looking at your younger self, the one who tried so hard to please everyone, and whispering, you did your best. Because that's what healing really is, a return to self-compassion. Some days, you'll move forward. Other days, you'll fall back into old patterns, overthinking, overworking, overcaring. But now, you catch yourself sooner. You speak to yourself softer. You treat yourself like someone worth saving. And slowly, the noise begins to fade. The world still moves fast, but you don't chase it anymore. You start choosing peace over perfection, presence over performance, and truth over image. You begin to live again, not as the perfect version of yourself, but as the real one. And in that realness, you find a kind of freedom you never thought possible. Because healing isn't about becoming new. It's about coming home, to the self you abandoned in the pursuit of being enough. Acceptance isn't giving up. It's letting go of the illusion that life has to be perfect to be meaningful. It's the quiet understanding that not everything will go your way, and that's okay. You stop fighting the flow of life and start moving with it. You stop demanding certainty and start embracing change. Because perfection wants control, but peace wants trust. When you begin to accept yourself, truly, you start to see the world differently. You realize that your worth was never something to earn. It was something to remember. You no longer chase validation because you understand that approval is fleeting. One day they love you, the next day they don't. But neither defines you. Acceptance means meeting yourself where you are, not where you think you should be. It's saying, yes, I still make mistakes. Yes, I still have flaws. And yes, I'm still worthy. That's strength. That's freedom. You stop resenting your past and start learning from it. You stop judging your scars and start honoring them. Because scars don't make you broken. They remind you that you healed. When you accept your imperfections, you also learn to accept others. You stop needing people to be perfect for you to love them. You stop holding them to impossible standards. You start seeing humanity, not performance. You begin to understand that everyone is fighting their own invisible battle, trying to look okay while quietly falling apart. And that's where compassion is born. Acceptance turns pain into wisdom, mistakes into lessons, and fear into understanding. It doesn't erase your struggles, it gives them meaning. You no longer see imperfection as failure. You see it as texture, the thing that makes you human, the thing that makes life beautiful. When you finally stop trying to be everything, you make space to just be. No masks, no pretending, just you, unfiltered, unpolished, and real. And in that stillness, you discover something you've been missing all along: peace. Not the peace that comes from everything going right, but the peace that stays even when everything doesn't. That's the power of acceptance. It doesn't fix you, it frees you. Because you were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be whole. There comes a moment in life when you stop running, when you stop chasing the version of yourself you thought the world wanted. And in that quiet pause, you finally meet the person you've been avoiding all along, your true self. Not the perfect one, not the one with all the answers, but the one who's been whispering beneath the noise, waiting to be seen. That's where healing begins. Because healing isn't about fixing yourself. It's about remembering that you were never broken. You just forgot who you were while trying to be who they wanted. When you finally allow yourself to be human, to feel deeply, to make mistakes, to love without fear of being judged, you begin to understand what it truly means to live. It's not about being flawless. It's about being real. Wholeness isn't perfection. It's integration. It's the harmony between your light and your shadows, your strengths and your flaws, your dreams and your doubts. To be whole is to embrace every piece of yourself, without shame, without apology. It's standing in your truth and saying, "This is me, raw, imperfect, but enough." And when you reach that point, you stop seeing life as a race. You stop comparing your path to others. You stop trying to impress people who were never meant to understand you. Instead, you start walking at your own pace. You start doing things because they feel right, not because they look right. You start choosing peace over approval. You begin to live, not for validation, but for alignment. The world will still try to pull you back. It will still whisper, "Be more, do more, prove more." But now you'll recognize that voice for what it is: fear. And you'll smile, because you've already met the part of you that no longer needs to prove anything. That's freedom. That's wholeness. The truth is, perfection was never the goal. It was the distraction. The real journey has always been toward authenticity, toward coming home to yourself. When you stop performing for the world, you start connecting with it. You begin to see beauty in the mess, meaning in the pain, and love in the places you once felt lost. That's when life starts to feel lighter. That's when you realize you don't need to be perfect to be worthy of peace. You just need to be you. And maybe that's what perfection really means. Not being without flaws, but being without pretense. So take a deep breath. Let go of the masks. Step into the quiet truth of who you are. You've spent your whole life trying to be perfect. Now it's time to be whole.